A college degree doesn't mean anything anymore, but that's normal. Most of the time, since the first one was founded, universities have not been about a career path. You didn't attend lectures every day to get an unpaid internship at the end. You went there to better yourself. Using a degree as a gateway to a higher salary is relatively new. When higher education was created over 1,000 years ago, it was all about the pursuit of knowledge for knowledge's sake. College has become a staple way for young people to enter the workforce, but only in the last 100 years or so. As enrollment increased and the value of degrees decreased, college has become nothing more than a summer camp for horny young adults who care more about partying than acing their finals. With AI making it even easier to shortcut a homework assignment, the importance of college has become questionable. Yet many believe that even with colleges on shaky ground, the future of education is brighter than ever. They say access to free education like YouTube, improved technology, and a healthy wariness of the gig economy could see people return to pursuing knowledge for knowledge's sake. It's a fair point. Why spend tens of thousands of dollars on tuition fees for a computer programming course when you can land a tech job by flipping burgers during the day and taking online courses designed by master coders at night? There's only one way to predict the future of higher education: to go back to the beginning of universities. It's 1088. The Aztec Empire was still a far-off dream of the nomadic Mexica people, while in medieval England, a rebellion was breaking out in the wake of William the Conqueror's death. But in Bologna, Italy, the world's first university was established. Its founding date is unknown, but historians know it was granted a charter by Frederick Barbarossa, also known as Holy Roman Emperor Frederick I. Initially, it was believed the university welcomed students in 1158, but historians discovered it was already open in 1088. It is the world's oldest operating university and is ranked 155th. Number 1 goes to Oxford University of England, which opened its doors in 1096, a few years after the Italians. Higher education is older than the Aztec Empire, the Crusades, and the heliocentric model of the universe. In fact, Copernicus, who presented the theory that the Earth revolves around the Sun, he was actually an alumnus of Bologna University, but he didn't study astronomy. Like most students who attended college at the turn of the first millennium, he was there to study theology or common law. Other courses offered in medieval Europe were structured around the foundational frameworks of the period. Trivium focused on language and critical thinking, so there were logic, rhetoric, and grammar courses. Quadrivium focused on higher mathematics such as arithmetic and astronomy, music and geometry, anything to do with numbers. Medicine was also popular, as were the liberal arts. Notice that there were no sports, business, accounting or engineering courses. That's because these places were about developing an understanding of the divine world. However, not everyone was allowed to acquire this insight. Never mind that a standardized education system wasn't in place, moonlighting as a blacksmith could never earn you the extra credits you needed for your course. The only way to get in was through privilege. Students were usually young men from elite or clerical families with a surplus of cash to fund the transportation of a child across Europe by stagecoach. These young men were destined for careers in government administration or, more than likely, the church. Most institutions were connected to the church, which provided funding and oversight. Professors were men of the cloth or other clergy members because universities adhered to religious charters. This means normal peasants like you and me would never be allowed near the sacred grounds of a university library. But then again, we wouldn't have cared. Higher education was not conceived as a means of social mobility back then. Any rich kid who was set up to work in the church or for the government was always going to end up there. College was just a pit stop. If anything, college was a way of maintaining society and its hierarchies. It wouldn't become a training ground for future workers for some time. When it changed to a gateway to employment, the writing was on the wall. It's time to learn how history works as we study the 1200-year rise and fall of college. Today's episode is sponsored by Brilliant. Brilliant is the ultimate platform for anyone who wants to not just learn, but truly grasp complex concepts. With thousands of interactive lessons spanning math, science, and technology, it makes learning both engaging and effective. I'm especially excited about their new How LLMs Work course. It dives into the inner workings of language models, showing how they learn and generate text. Whether you're just curious about AI or considering a career in tech, this course offers a hands-on way to explore one of today's most powerful technologies. I've been going through the course myself, and it's incredible to see how different models function and how they can be fine-tuned for various tasks. whether it's writing poetry or drafting professional emails. Brilliant makes complex topics like this approachable, even if you're completely new to them. And the best part? You can learn on your own schedule, seamlessly fitting Brilliant's interactive lessons into your daily routine, whether you have just 5 minutes or a full hour to dive in. To explore everything Brilliant has to offer, including their new How LLMs Work course, for free for 30 days, head over to brilliant.org/howhistoryworks, or click the link in the description. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription. The Renaissance lasted from the 14th to the 17th century. It had defined a fervent period of cultural, artistic, political, scientific, and economic rebirth. Universities were key players during this transition. Studies focused on the hot new trends like classical texts, philosophies, and the arts. This was radical. For the first few hundred years, college was all about the Bible. Introducing philosophy alongside history and literature courses was huge. It's easy to underestimate how much of a shift this was in our modern secular times. So the university's move to focus on human endeavours and ideas beyond scripture was a sign of where society was headed. Universities sped up the Renaissance because they helped concentrate interests and discussions in an institution. Never before had the pursuit of knowledge been so revolutionary. Take the case of Erasmus of Rotterdam, one of the most influential scholars of the period. He studied in Paris during the 15th century. Like other students from far away, he spoke Latin, the agreed-upon language of education. At one point, he was so broke that he asked a friend to lend him money so that he could buy candles to study at night. When his friends teased him about his financial predicament, he explained that whenever he gets money, he buys books. If he has change left over, he'll buy food and clothes. This anecdote highlights students' dedication during the Renaissance. However, there was more competition now. Almost all students came from wealthy or noble families, so money may not have been an issue. Unless you were a student of the arts, you had to seek out wealthy patrons to fund your own projects. In any case, the utility of a college education was still narrow. Whether you went into the church, law, or medicine, there weren't a lot of other places you could go. Social mobility was still determined by your parents' wealth. However, when the Enlightenment arrived, education slowly became a requirement for employment. After the Renaissance waned at the end of the 17th century, the Enlightenment took over. Universities transformed into bastions of reason, science, and empirical observation. These new foundations of experimentation and discovery laid the groundwork for disciplines like physics, chemistry, and biology. One man who helped usher in this change was Jean-Jacques Rousseau. In 1762, he published a radical novel called Émile, or Treatise on Education. The fictional account described a boy who learned to better himself by doing things with his hands, like carpentry and gardening, rather than by rote memorization or religious instruction. If you're a visual learner or prefer to learn by doing, then you are the type of student that the Enlightenment tried to include. However, this idea was so controversial that it was initially banned in France because it contradicted the rigid, classical education of the time. That, and the fact its attitudes to religion and child rearing were too much for the clergy. But Jean-Jacques was onto something. From the start of human history, studying was as exciting as copying down whatever your teacher wrote on a chalkboard. When students of ancient Rome studied, they would etch into wax tablets. Fast forward to the modern day, and many college lectures use the same approach. Instead of writing on a wax tablet, students write into a tablet of silicone chips. As society began to value rational thought and empirical knowledge more, specialized expertise emerged. This helped form a pathway between education and employment. Universities began to focus more on practical and secular jobs like modern languages and science. At the time, these were invaluable for an increasingly commercial and industrial world, but this also meant a vetting system across the board. For example, the criteria needed to be a high-income lawyer or doctor were strict, which in turn spurred the formation of licenses and qualifications. These necessary requirements into employment increased enrollment, which saw more students from different backgrounds. Governments saw the economic and administrative value of an educated populace, so they sought to improve these institutions to produce skilled workers, some of whom ended up working at the very same university. These feedback loops helped increase society's intelligence, skills, and robustness. The next step was to regulate schools and universities more closely, including creating teacher training colleges and programs. Schooling became compulsory, which moved society towards a more egalitarian outcome. Although universities still reflected a class structure, education was gradually spreading throughout the world. However, universities hit a setback. Despite the revolutionary transformation of universities from places of Bible study to places of learning, they started to be seen as a place to learn old things. Not old as in history, but old as in out of touch, out of fashion, obsolete, or just wrong. Imagine that. A college teaching you things that no longer apply in the real world. New knowledge came from scientific societies, such as the Royal Society in England or the Académie des Sciences in France. These were hubs of innovations and finding new discoveries. College, by contrast, was seen as a place where young people went to inherit existing knowledge, usually in preparation for employment. This came to a head at the start of the 18th century when the first industrial revolution hit. As economies transitioned from agrarian to industrial, universities and other educational institutions adapted to meet the growing demands for skills, labour, practical knowledge, and technological expertise. Studies like history, arts, and languages became less revered as only the wealthy could afford to pursue them. Liberal arts became the pastime of the wealthy, and trade courses became the interest of what we would call today blue-collar workers. As factories were erected across the land, it became clear that a privileged background shouldn't be the main way a student gains entry to college. The labour force demanded workers and skilled labour, so this economic shift pressured universities to open the doors to anyone who had talents, skills, and intelligence. Engineering and mathematics became the most sought-after studies as they directly impacted industrial growth. Technical schools emerged primarily to train engineers, and curricula were overhauled to include practical work relevant to factory employment. Bit by bit, education has become a training ground for work life. It was no longer about the pursuit of knowledge. It was no longer about refining new skills. Now it was a way to produce workers. By the 19th century, compulsory schooling had become the norm in the Western world. In America, the Morrill Act of 1862 aimed to make higher education more accessible to farmers and working-class citizens. With improvements in literacy and numeracy among children from poor backgrounds, it looked like universities had finally been cracked. Anyone could go and better themselves and their nation, right? Almost. Another feedback loop was created. Educated graduates improved factories, leading to more complexity, which led to specialised jobs, which invented specialised studies and postgraduate programs. As more and more specialists were created, the basic level of college became more undervalued. Think of it like graduating as an engineer 100 years ago compared to today. When it comes to really nice jobs, you'll need more than a bachelor's degree. To even get close to landing a job, you'll need a master's, maybe a PhD, license, residency, and teaching hours. At the same time, automation displaced many middle-skilled workers. University was hollowing out job opportunities and creating an employment and knowledge gap. What's the solution? More courses and specialised studies. Add colonialism to that, and the stage was set for a global spread of universities, especially during the nation rebuilding of post-war countries. By the early 20th century, universities were revered global institutions whose reputation directly correlated with a country's GDP. Unfortunately, it was only a matter of time until this system reached critical mass. As the 20th century got underway, a college education became a necessity for a higher standard of living. That's because the level of education you were getting was high and degrees were scarce. However, as the 21st century approached, the enrollment standards dropped and the number of degrees and diplomas became plentiful. The value of a degree was in its scarcity, but now anyone can get one through a part-time online course. To make matters worse, tuition fees and inflation increased so much that the return on investment for a college education has decreased. The public is more skeptical about college today. 47% of Americans would only say college is worth it if there were no loans. But once you factor in the reality of student finances, the number of Americans confident in higher education drops to 27%. The college administrations themselves have become so large that they are slow to respond to any change. They've become an industry within an industry, like college football. In short, the machine is too big. And with the cost of living going up in the last couple of years and the decline in the job market, there's no guarantee of securing a job once you graduate, let alone something in your given field and pays well. Geopolitical tensions have reduced international enrollment, a dependable source of income for universities for a long time. Meanwhile, demographic shifts at home have reduced the pool of potential students. Birth rates are plummeting, meaning enrollment rates will fall off a cliff in only a few years. So not only are fewer young people interested in college, but most of the ones who do graduate will be in a worse employment situation than their peers who went straight to a trade school. Blue-collar work has grown in demand while white-collar jobs have fallen. Many new workers in white-collar fields had qualifications outside of the industry, such as in liberal arts, history, and languages. On top of that, the waves of culture wars and partying have changed the image of college. Now it's where high school graduates go for an American Pie send-off to their youth, or where political activists go to dissuade actual students from attending their exams. In short, college is now performative. It's something you do because it's just something you do. Before, young adults went to ballroom dances and poetry readings, now they play beer pong and stage artistic political protests. We haven't even mentioned COVID. For students studying during the pandemic, the lockdowns deprived them of signature college experiences like parties, dorm room antics, and lectures. With the bells and whistles gone, it exposed how little college has to offer. On top of that, disruptive technology will make things much worse. AI has made it easier for bad students to succeed, which means your hard work has less chance of being noticed. In fact, AI threatens to automate most of the industries that a typical college degree would have guaranteed. Even coveted disciplines like engineering, accounting, and design are increasingly integrating AI. So even if you are among the lucky few grads to get a prized engineering internship at NASA, you might not be there long before a machine replaces you. The final nail in the coffin is the spread of free education. Harvard, Oxford, and Stanford are the most respected universities in the history of the world. Yet, many of their professors upload their lectures and classes for free on YouTube and other video platforms. This means you can get an Ivy League college-level education for free. You might not have that shiny Harvard diploma at the end of it, but you also won't have that college-level debt holding you back. If you factor in the spread of remote working, you might not even need to uproot to an expensive city to get a head start in life. Your personal projects can be as valuable to an employer as a formal college education. Imagine teaching yourself to code using free online resources. Imagine creating your very own video game with polish and passion. Now ask yourself, what would a hiring manager at Google prefer to see? Someone who taught themselves to make something of high quality while flipping burgers during the day? Or a computer science graduate who might have the skills but cannot demonstrate their hunger for knowledge and determination for success? How are colleges reacting to a generation of students who'd rather study online than in their lecture halls? Well, one strategy is to do more of what they've always done. Micro degrees, specialist courses, and ongoing training. However, critics say that's just sticking a band-aid on the problem. They say the only way colleges can compete is to streamline. They could cut courses, reduce the administrative staff, and reprimand students who interrupt examinations for their current political cause. With so many tenured professors and administrative staff on the payroll, plus all the wealthy alumni donors expecting favours down the line, it wouldn't be easy for colleges to trim the fat. That leaves a final option: partner more tightly with industries. Degree apprenticeships and co-op programs would better prepare students for real job opportunities. The risk is that this stability would become even more rigid and make college nothing more than an expensive training program for a job you will end up hating. Maybe that's how it was supposed to be. Maybe college was best as a way to preserve society's order so that those interested in knowledge and skills for their own sake can take advantage of the available resources without being indoctrinated. If you liked this video, check out our one on the rise and fall of the office job, and subscribe to keep learning how history works.